What's going on? This is Pat from Asteroid X, and I wanted to address the tariffs that the Trump administration has put in place and how they affect Amazon sellers and what you can do specifically to create a game plan to keep profits high and maybe even to grow revenue and profit during this time. As they say, you don't never want to waste a good crisis, and this is one such crisis. It reminds me a lot of COVID. If you were selling on Amazon during, March of 2020, Amazon started to restrict FBA warehousing space, so that was a sort of macro problem at the time. And then, we worked around it. Like sellers found different warehousing, different fulfillment solutions, and in some cases expanded their market reach because their competitors weren't doing that. So, in times of change, there's often opportunity, but it can be difficult to deal with at first and to figure out exactly what to do in your particular situation. So that's what I hope to help you with in this video. And so I've put together a blog article which has everything, and I'm sort of continuously updating it with new thoughts as we get new news and events change and companies or countries rather make concession tariffs and they come to the table and they negotiate. So I'll keep updating this. Last time was about an hour ago. So yeah, and again, it's an evolving situation, informational purposes only, not straight up business advice, not investment advice. For your particular situation, if you want to chat about it, we have experts on standby. And so I've included the Calendly link there, or just go to asteroidx.com, asteroid like the rock in space, and then the letter x.com, and we will chat with you about your situation. But to give you a general overview, you probably know this already, as it's been in the news and in the markets a little bit. I mean, the market has had something of a reaction. The tariffs are taxes that the importer pays. So if we're using the classic Amazon FBA private label business model where we're importing products from China and selling them to U.S. customers in the U.S. on Amazon.com, we will pay, by default, say we will pay those taxes to import that stuff from China. The Trump administration is trying to improve the U.S. manufacturing base. They want, America to make stuff in America and sell to Americans. However, because it is a very long list of countries that are getting hit with these tariffs, including China, probably the most important player on the list when it comes to Amazon selling. This poses a significant challenge because the cost of importing products from China could go way up, as we'll see. I'll show you an example with a example Amazon product, but it could be 50, 60, 70, 80% more expensive, and those are the entire profit margins of an Amazon business just gone. Right? So that's a business breaking problem if it's not solved. I'll give you some solutions that we've developed so far, but certainly big problem. All right. Warren Buffett says the tooth fairy doesn't pay him in relation to the tariffs. It is true. The importer pays them, and so it is likely going to be really difficult to import stuff from these countries. China. And by the way, like the U.S. administration over the last, over the years, say last 5, 10 years, has been maybe discouraging some Chinese manufacturing from happening. So many sellers, Amazon sellers, diligently set up shop in Vietnam, Cambodia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, like all of these countries, and all of these countries also have tariffs. Again, at the these countries will now enter into negotiations with the U.S. government, and maybe they'll reciprocally drop their tariffs and try to address their trade imbalances, I guess, a little bit, and maybe these numbers will come down. So, but nevertheless, yeah, I mean, these are quite significant. And on China specifically, I mean, this new list, and here's just a version of the list from the New York Times. I've linked it in the article, but 20% to the EU, for example. These tariffs stack. It's important to know. So the new tariffs that were announced just a couple days ago at the time of recording, these new tariffs stack on top of additional tariffs that were already there. So this poses a problem for China. China already had an existing 20% tariffs on goods brought in, plus 34 is 54%. So if you're importing Chinese goods and China and the U.S. don't come to a consensus on here and fix these numbers, you're going to be paying starting April 9th, 2025, 54% more to import stuff from China. That makes the profit margins on Amazon untenable, I would think, right? Unless you have amazing margins to begin with and you can take the hit. But most sellers have profit margins of 15 to 20%, so it's going to be tricky in that regard. And same for all these other countries that maybe in the past folks have tried to diversify their supply chains in, and a 10% on the rest of the world kicking in. Right. There are some countries that have come to the negotiating table with the U.S. and have, dropped their tariff requirements on U.S. goods, and so I think this was part of the intended consequence that the Trump administration had in mind. So again, this is that'll develop, and some of these numbers will come down, but China is going to be a tricky one to reduce, as they've already applied their own tariffs to U.S. goods coming in. So yeah, margins are tough. I recently attended a webinar with Flexport, the shipping company, and I found these examples really helpful. So shout out to Flexport. This is a steel water bottle that is brought in from China to the U.S. And then here are the sort of different itemized tariffs, right, that have come in, right? And so a seller would end up, an Amazon seller importing a water bottle like this to resell on Amazon for their business. Again, the costs go up 55.2%. And then it depends on the class of item too. So like a sofa would be up 79% and a microwave 83. So the tariffs are going to depend on the country of origin and also the type of product, because there were pre-existing tariffs as well that stack, right? And so this is just an example of that stacking and how the final tariff number may be different depending on the type of product. So we'll talk about this, but my first recommendation for sellers, for Amazon sellers, is just to be like, okay, where exactly do my products fall in this tariff stacking scheme? What's the country of origin? The phrase that the Flexport team used that I really like was like dirt to shirt. Can we map out the sort of our supply chain on each SKU that we have on a SKU level from dirt to shirt, such that we can kind of estimate, okay, what are our costs even going to be here? What are our increased costs going to be? And that depends again on country and country of origin and sort of type of product, right? And these ones, here's another example from the automotive industry. These are uh, kind of interesting as well, especially on the Chinese side. But like, an SUV coming from Canada, 10.8. Cylinder sports car, Canada, 52.5. So that's because this is a non-USMCA. So again, we just gotta uh, dot our I's, cross our T's here as we're importing stuff. I know Amazon sellers aren't importing cars, but it's the same logic still holds. And this Chinese steel bumper, because steel again they want to there's an extra tariff just on steel, 131.5%, brutal, prohibitively expensive to import. The de minimis exemption, where I think it's Shein and Temu, these fast fashion companies, they were sending products to the U.S. And if the proclaimed value was under $800, it was U.S. duty free. That's going away too. It seems like the U.S. is still building the systems and the capability to be able to do that, so that's not going to come into effect right away. But if you're, say, drop shipping small quantities of stuff, just be aware that that is also going away as well. And so um, let's get into the strategies. Let's get into really what we came here to talk about, which is, what as an Amazon seller, how can we respond to this? Because again, back in 2020, COVID hit, Amazon limited FBA warehousing space. We adapted, and here again, roughly 5 years later, maybe there's some big macro event every at least 10 years that comes along like this for Amazon sellers, and so we deal with it accordingly, right? I sort of bucket these solutions into two categories. On the one hand, if you're already selling on Amazon.com in the U.S., it's probably a good idea to maximize the profit. Let's get as much profit as we can, because we're already selling in that marketplace. Let's not shy away from the opportunity. Let's see how much more we can actually make, and if we can maintain margins. So that's the kind of one bucket of dealing with problems as they currently exist on the Amazon U.S. marketplace. The other bucket, which I'm very excited about as well, is how can we work around this problem? Like maybe we don't have to hit our head into a brick wall trying to solve Amazon.com entirely. Maybe let's step around the wall and walk the other way. And so there's some solutions that I have for you there too. I've sort of, and again, you can find this article on our website. It's if you head over to asteroidx.com and then you go to resources, it's a blog article under resources. So I'll also link it maybe below in the description. Um, so, but yeah, so if you're so let's talk about U.S. profit maximization first, okay? Under 1A, right? I talked about this just now, but I think it's before we actually do anything, before we have any sort of knee-jerk reaction on raising prices or switching our supply chain or talking to other suppliers, like let's just get a handle on how bad is it really. And so what we want to do here is kind of just understand that the ground has shifted beneath our feet. So based on where our various products are sourced and what type of product it is and what it's made of and all this, our tariffs are going to differ. And so our margins, our profit margins are going to differ. Maybe we had entirely different profit margins last week than we were going to have this week. And so it's just a matter of creating a product library in a spreadsheet, again on the SKU level, and analyzing, okay, these are my costs before in regular times, and now in tariff town, what are my new costs going to be? And I think that again, just doing that on the SKU level will give us a snapshot. We can't really do anything before we have more data. So that's the one kind of exercise I would recommend just to even kick this thing off, just to get a sense of like where we are in terms of our supply chains and the increased costs that we could incur. And that will yield basically a new profit margin for each SKU that was probably very different. Maybe our really profitable stuff is less profitable. Maybe some SKUs go largely, well, depending on where they're sourced. I don't think any SKUs are going to go totally unchanged, but it's possible, right? Or maybe a made in America SKU that would be totally unchanged, right? The other thing is just open up a dialogue with suppliers. Couldn't hurt, right? The worst case is we get hit with these tariffs and we have to pay all of them. But maybe you've been a long-term customer. Maybe you've placed a lot of orders in the past. Maybe your supplier is already working on something like this, right? But disclaimer, and the guys at Flexport had a good disclaimer about this. Don't let the supplier become the importer of record, or just you or the supplier cut any corners. We don't want to defy U.S. custom law in any way. It's not worth it. And also, because the Trump administration has enacted these, it's easy to imagine that they'll be stepping up a U.S. custom headcount to deal with the enforcement of these policies as well. So that's just something to talk about. But yeah, just opening dialogue with suppliers and seeing, can these costs be shared, if anything? What are they cooking up that could be helpful in terms of margins? Just chatting, right? So after we've sort of done 1A, so which is kind of getting a handle on what the new margins are for each product on a SKU level under this kind of tariff regime, what are the new margins? And it's then time to say, if we're running ads currently, it's then time to say, okay, it used to make sense to run ads to the SKU with a lot of spend, but now the margins are lower and it doesn't make sense. Whereas this other SKU kept a lot of its margins, and I should push more ad spend towards that one. So because margins changed, then the priority of which products to push change, and so ad spend should change. So there's sort of that ripple effect that stems from, again, this exercise of getting a product library in place and figuring out what the new margins are given this stuff, right? Now, this is D on the alphabetical scale here. I would recommend, definitely there's an impulse, and it's totally understandable, by the way, to increase pricing. Surely a lot of these tariffs, they're much too high for businesses not to pass any of the costs on to the end consumer. Totally get it. I just think a blanket price increase strategy is probably could do more damage than good. Meaning, if some brands will do this because they're not talking about it like we're talking about it now. Some brands may slap on a universal 20% price increase, 30% price increase across all the SKUs. And this is likely to, well, A, that doesn't account for the difference in margin profile that we kind of just talked about, but also um, that will hurt the sales just by basic supply and demand. If the price goes up, the demand will go down. And so this could hurt keyword ranking and just like the prominence of the product in Amazon's ranking algorithm overall. Very dangerous stuff. We may have a higher profit margin per SKU, but if our sales go down low enough because we lost our ranking, like we still make less money overall. So instead, I'm talking about A/B testing, small incremental price increases over time. That would be a suggestion. And we still have a bit of time, right? Because these tariffs go into place on April 9th, which is at the time of recording it, a few days. So we have a bit of time to start, at least start the A/B testing. Yes, in 4 or 5 days at the time of recording. Okay. The just some clever refactoring could be done, right? So like I'm sure you've bought furniture from IKEA. Part of the reason IKEA has such good margins is because it's totally self-serve, which Amazon is inherently, but also they have you assemble everything yourself, and you have that weird little Allen key that comes with it, and somehow you have one metal part that somehow manages to miraculously assemble all this furniture. It's cool, and it's cost saving and could help, right? If you have products with batteries, consider shipping them without the batteries. Again, that's more of a supplier discussion, but is the packaging anything that could be shrunk down without damaging the product? Could we lose some frills on the packaging? Is that possible, right? Could we break SKUs down into parts so that the whole thing is flatter, smaller, sleeker, but still developing or still delivering that great end result to the customer that they wanted? On the other, sort of on the flip side, this is more of a bonus, but if you do happen to have any made in USA SKUs, broadcast that. We are experimenting right now with made in USA SKUs. We're experimenting with the made in USA keywords and also just including it on the listings in the text and the photos of the listing. It increases the conversion rate significantly. So if you do happen to have, if you're in a lucky position, if you happen to have any of those, broadcast it, advertise it, and the conversion rates on those products are going to go up. Okay, so these are a bunch of things on how to profit optimize on the Amazon.com platform. Let's talk about how to just you know um, avoid this situation altogether and potentially grow revenue and grow profit. Instead of just woe is me, the margins are down. Let's have some fun with it, and let's see if we can create opportunity from what is it could be a crisis for some sellers. So on the one hand, we have international expansion, right? The U.S. government is enacting these tariffs, not Canada, Mexico, UK, right? The EU even, right? So if you could keep the back end, the supply chain the exact same, and then just syndicate and distribute your products on these different Amazon marketplaces. It's very similar to what you're already doing in the US, but it's taking it and porting it over to Canada, for example. Now, there are some country specific requirements, like Canada has a dual language packaging requirement, for example, right? And so feel free to book a call with a rep if you want to go through that, and we can walk you through it and help you with the expansion. The second thing is just, and this is probably one of the desired outcomes of these tariffs in the first place, source some SKUs in the US, right? There's a site called ThomasNet. If you Google it, you'll find it right away. And it's a good fit. It's basically like Alibaba, but for US suppliers. And they may also, if they're importing raw materials from other countries, they may also have a cost increase, but perhaps some of them are based around U.S. products, or they have more U.S. based supply chains. And so this would be, again, just kind of we're putting out some feelers and we're diversifying and we're getting some different SKUs online potentially. This one is a bit more tentative, but you'll notice from the New York Times kind of tariff list, right? Asia was hit quite hard with the tariffs, but Latin America was not as much, right? And due to some already existing, trade back and forth between the U.S. and the Latin American countries. And so I don't know if this will stick, but there are many Latin American countries that have some good manufacturing going on, right? And so you may be able to source your product, similar products, sister products, new SKUs entirely from these different countries, and the margins can be more intact that way. And lastly, it's a model that I've written about in the past, and I've linked it here. You can team up with kind of local, if you go to you know, a state fair or your local market, there's a ton of these vendors that make stuff locally that are looking for distributor help. And so it might be time, again, this is more of an elbow grease thing and just um, sort of just a matter of time and effort. But if you wanted to add some SKUs, you could do it this week, next week, by approaching some companies that make stuff locally in the city or town that you're in. You say, hey, I'm on Amazon. I know how Amazon works. Why don't I take all that work off your plate, and I'll list your products on Amazon, and I'll pay you, whatever. We'll split it 50-50, or I'll pay you 40%, or whatever, right? And there you go. You could set up dozens of new SKUs this way, with no money down, no manufacturing whatsoever, because that's with them, right? And yeah, I mean, it's a good model. I've seen it work, and so that's there for you in your pocket as well if you need to. Um, Again, Ryan Peterson of Flexport spoke to someone in the administration, and basically noted that these tariffs, as we see them here, this is probably the start of conversations and not the end of conversations. Expect these things to fluctuate a lot, but I wanted to come up and address this early, so that you can get ahead of it even before the tariffs are enacted, and you can get a plan in place. And again, if you want to chat with someone from my team on this, just go to asteroidx.com, and we'll take care of you. We can talk about international expansion. We can talk about pricing. We can talk about ad spend allocation, all the stuff that we talked about here. Okay. Thanks a lot. That's all I got for now. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon.